Hello, this is Tracy Shores, and I'm starting a new adventure to share the things that God has laid on my heart, especially in relation to my husband's going home. It's about to be 1 year, and I just want to share some things with you that hopefully will encourage you. And it's been, even today, trying to do this video, it seems we want to have perfect, and the Lord is like, Tracy, just do it. And so that's what I'm going to try to get through and share with you. Today I actually got up, got ready for church. I'm dressed for church. I brought everyone to church. I walked the kids upstairs. My little guys, checked them in. I came down the stairs, and someone who genuinely cares for me said, "How are you?" And I artificially said, "Oh, good," and da-da-da. And I walked away from her and felt a sense of, I have got to leave church. I'm not going to make it. And so I did indeed retreat. At times I do press through, but I felt like, okay, I need to get away and spend some time with God. And I came home, and because I've been thinking about that relationship between life and death, I ended up in this chapter, 1 Corinthians 15. And really what happened is that people asked me, how am I? And a family member asked me yesterday, and I expressed that I'm not trying to pretend one thing or the other, because I can cry almost every day, every other day. But then also on that same day, I can feel very alive. And so that's what I was defining to them, that I feel this relationship between life and death. They're like so close together. And I have a sense of aliveness, like certain things, hugs of my little children, or the beauty in things is, it's almost like a born again experience when you first give your life to the Lord, how a sunset can look like the most spectacular, like the Lord did that sunset just for you. And indeed he did, but you feel that in every part of your body. And so I can feel that aliveness, and then I can literally in a second be in a place of death, in the heaviness of the loss and the grief of the person you love, and the longing and the suffering, and it's overwhelming. And so and I think this chapter, actually, after looking at it for about an hour now, I had initially thought one thing, what are the important things in this chapter? Why did the Lord lead me here? What is he trying to say to me? And in looking at it all, then I started to see this theme, vanity. And it's actually, the word vain is used in the King James and other translations. It talks about, that if Christ has not raised from the dead, then our faith is vain, that everything we do is futile. And so, and the whole chapter really, it begins with being steadfast in this, be immovable in the gospel and what I shared. And then Paul answers those who say Christ has not risen. And then he reminds them again that Christ indeed did rise. But I also wanted to talk, because I think for any of us, and especially when you're really shook to the core about the meaning of life and about what we're doing, the importance of daily activities, when there is great loss and tragedy, sometimes everything feels vain. There's a sense of futility, like it doesn't matter. And so that's why I think this chapter really talks to people like myself who are, whether it's a loss of a spouse or a child or some great loss, because there's a sense of, what does it matter, and I think what God is saying to us through Paul in this chapter, that it does matter. And then he goes on to describe, which is really important, that unless a seed dies, unless it is buried, it can't bring forth the beautiful plant that it is. And so often I think in those moments of death where we feel like we're planted deep down in the dark muck of life, where we think, oh my goodness, I can't keep fighting, I can't. And that's when the enemy begins to say, all your efforts are vain. What are you doing this for? There's, you're going to stay in this dark place, and this isn't going to bring for your family. This death, this tragedy is not going to produce this beautiful thing that God has promised. He begins to tell us that all of our efforts are vain. And we know that that is not the truth. and Paul reminds us that those things I want to read actually. He says, let's see, there's so much in this chapter. But the last verse 58 says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord." It also here's in the New Living Translation. "So, my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless." And so I think, when we're in that dark place of that seed that's very deep in the ground, sometimes we don't see the light. We don't feel the light. We can't even we can't imagine a future that the God has planned. And so I think that it's important to remember that everything we do for the Lord, it's not in vain. It will produce in its season and be a beautiful picture of God. And I think this chapter also, what's really important, it talks about glory. We know it's the relation between the glory and the light. Also read actually in Revelation, it's chapter 21, talks about there'll be no need for sun or moon, but the Lord himself will be that light, and the Lamb, Yeshua, Jesus, will be the lamp. And so, and their light. And I was even thinking and looking at this, Jesus prayed one time, "Lord, glorify me with the glory I knew, and that was the glory that I had before the whole world existed." And so we can't really even comprehend. I think when we go through a very traumatic loss, or any loss of a close family member, or any traumatic loss, and loss is traumatic, we can relate more to what Jesus experienced. But he was with the Father in all of his glory, and then he came to earth. And this is where that chapter ties in, right? He was he actually did begin in the imperishable, and then became the perishable. But because he became the perishable, then he died so that the imperishable could live. And so I'm just thinking personally for us, and how that brings glory to the Father. These things, really, any death in our life, it has the potential to bring God so much glory, right? It dies. The perishable, the natural comes first, and then the spiritual. So we have these natural feelings and this natural death, and it dies perishable. But as that seed is being grown into a beautiful, whatever God grows it into, it's becoming imperishable. And so not just at the end of life, but in every area of our life, where that's happening. I mean, different people have different areas of their life where God has produced a death in that area, and because it's been planted, and it's been given to the Lord, and it's been watered in the Lord, and even if that place doesn't feel a sense of sprouting forth or bringing forth new, eventually when it does, that area of our life is sort of raised in the imperishable. And even as someone experiencing great loss, right, we have a sense of the imperishable as far as our time and our moments. We have such a weightiness on the present, because the present time, like not the present, but the actual present time, because we know that it's so temporary. We know that that in just a moment it could be taken. And so that is in a sense that imperishable. For us now, you can't take that from me. I know the value of life. And so that's why I feel it so close together. And there is glory in that, and that brings glory to the Father. When we're so in the moment, right? Why do you worry about tomorrow, right? For each day has enough trouble of its own. But when you get the understanding that living in the moment is such a beautiful place to be. And so be encouraged. God has good things for you. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of what God has put on my heart. Blessings.